Have you ever found yourself, maybe at work, staring at a problem that just feels like a massive tangled knot, and you just wish, you had an expert guide to help you unravel it? Or maybe you've wondered what actually goes on behind the scenes when a big company calls in consultants. Because it's definitely more than just a quick chat and a report. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on that exact world. We're talking about this structured, collaborative, and often, well, pretty transformative process of consulting. We're doing a deep dive to really uncover how these teams tackle complex problems, how they move past the obvious stuff, and ultimately, how they turn those big challenges into genuine success stories.
That's absolutely right. Our goal here is to really demystify this meticulous process. It's often iterative. Consultants go back and forth. We'll be drawing straight from our sources to give you a clear kind of insider perspective on how they develop tailored solutions, drive real change, and importantly, create lasting value. You might actually be surprised by some of the steps involved. They're not always obvious.
Absolutely. And hopefully by the end of this deep dive, you'll have a much clearer picture, not just of what consultants do day to day, but the core principles behind their whole approach. And maybe even more importantly, those crucial factors that can, well, make or break a whole project. So, yeah, let's get into it. Let's unpack this. So, okay, picture this. Your business hits a major hurdle, a challenge so complex it feels like, I don't know, untangling spaghetti blindfolded. That's usually when a consulting firm might step in. And their job isn't just to cut the knot, but to very methodically unravel it piece by piece. This consulting process itself, it's this really interesting framework. It's structured, sure, but it's also flexible.
Yeah.
It's basically a path, right, from finding the problem all the way to implementing the solution.
And what's fascinating, I think, is just how deliberate each step really is. It's not random. Every single stage demands a unique mix of skills, specific tools, proven methods to get through it effectively. It's definitely not a one-size-fits-all thing. It has to adapt to the client's specific situation.
Okay, so let's start right at the beginning. That crucial first step. A client calls. They often have an idea of what they think the problem is, right?
All right.
But how do consultants actually start figuring out what the real problem might be? Do you find you often have to sort of gently steer them away from their initial assumptions?
Oh, definitely. You've hit on something really key there. Problem identification, it isn't just the first step. It's often the most critical one. It involves a lot of initial data gathering, conducting really deep interviews with key people across the company, sometimes folks who don't even realize they have a piece of the puzzle, and using diagnostic tools, too. Think of it like being a detective, really. Getting that early clarity, even if it challenges what the client initially thought, is just vital. It sets the direction for everything that follows. Get it wrong here.
And you're solving the wrong problem.
Exactly. Everything else can be slightly off or completely off.
Okay, so once they have that initial grasp, maybe they've gently challenged the client's view, how do they start peeling back the layers? How do they really understand the anatomy of the problem?
Right. That's where the assessment and analysis phase properly kicks in. So here, consultants are collecting and really digging into much more detailed data. They'll often benchmark the client's performance against others in the industry, see how they stack up, And they lineage pretty sophisticated analytical models. These could be things like market segmentation, maybe predictive models to see which customers might leave. The main goal is uncovering those often hidden underlying issues and identifying what we sometimes call levers for change. Those spots where a small tweak could actually create a really big impact, like maybe a small change in onboarding drastically cuts employee turnover later.
Right, finding those high impact points. Okay, so they've dug deep, they understand the roots of the issue. Now comes the creative part, I guess. Turning all those insights into actual tangible solutions. How does that work? Is it just brainstorming?
It's definitely more structured than just brainstorming, though that's part of it. This is the strategic solution development phase. It's very collaborative. So, armed with all that research and analysis, consultants use a mix of creative thinking, yes, but also really rigorous strategic planning to come up with recommendations. And these solutions, they need to be comprehensive. They can't just be band-aids for the symptoms. They have to tackle the root causes, the interplay of maybe behaviors, old systems, market shifts, and crucially, they've got to align with the client's overall goals and, importantly, what the client can actually do. You can't suggest something they just don't have the resources or capability to implement.
That makes sense. Then comes the big reveal, right? The presentation of recommendations. I imagine this isn't just sending over a massive PowerPoint deck. What makes this presentation so critical? How do they make sure these, brilliant solutions actually land with the client and don't just feel like, I don't know, academic theories?
You're spot on. It's much more than just a data dump. This is the moment. It's where all those insights, all that work gets communicated to the key decision makers. Consultants use really clear, persuasive communication. Often storytelling helps make it relatable. They need to articulate the benefits of the proposed solutions. It's about translating complex stuff into a strategy the client can actually see working, that they can feel will make a difference. It's building that compelling case, handling objections, and making sure the client is truly bought in, not just nodding along.
Okay, makes sense. So the client's on board. They like the plan. But do consultants just, present the findings, shake hands, and walk away? Or do they actually stick around for the implementation, the heavy lifting?
Oh, they very often play a really key role in supporting the implementation. It's crucial. Now, that support can look very different. Sometimes it's high-level oversight, project management, like a guiding hand. Other times it's much more hands-on, helping execute specific parts of the plan. Think of it like bridging that gap between the strategy on paper and the reality on the ground. The focus is always ensuring the solutions are put into practice effectively, tackling any roadblocks that pop up, and setting the organization up for real lasting success. It's absolutely where the rubber meets the road.
Right, the execution phase.
Yeah.
And once that rubber has hit the road, how do they know if it actually worked? How do they measure success and, make sure the changes actually stick?
Good question. That's where monitoring and evaluation becomes so important. After implementation, you absolutely have to track the outcomes. You need to evaluate the real impact of what was done, and importantly, be ready to make adjustments if needed. Things rarely go perfectly first time. This usually involves setting up clear performance metrics, maybe dashboards, getting feedback from employees and customers, holding regular review meetings. It's all about checking progress, refining things, and making sure the original goals are met and sustained over time.
Okay, and this last stage you mentioned knowledge transfer and closure. It sounds kind of like the teaching them to fish part, right? Making sure the client can keep things going without the consultants. What does that involve?
It absolutely is that. And it's critical, though sometimes, honestly, it gets a bit overlooked when projects are wrapping up. This is where the consultants actively transfer knowledge and skills back to the client's team. It could mean setting up training programs, creating detailed documentation for new processes, maybe even helping define new internal roles to champion the changes going forward. The whole point is empowering the client, enabling them to sustain the improvements themselves long after the consultants have left, and hopefully build on that success. Then the process finishes with a formal closure, reviewing the results, documenting what was learned, both good and bad, and maybe offering some recommendations for the future.
Okay, we've walked through the kind of ideal blueprint, the stages. But now let's make it real. Because as we all know, theory is one thing, but the real world of business,
Yeah.
well, it can be messy. This is where it gets really interesting, I think. We're going to look at some actual stories, times when this process worked brilliantly, but also, importantly, some cautionary tales where things went off the rails.
Yeah, these case studies, they offer such valuable lessons. They really highlight the dynamics of the process in action, and they spotlight those critical factors we've touched on, things like alignment, actually getting things done, execution, and just how crucial adaptability is when unexpected things happen, which they always do.
Okay, let's start with a positive one, a success story. Picture a large, well-known retail chain. They were really struggling, facing declining sales, lots of pressure from online competitors. They needed a major shakeup.
Right. So in this case, the consulting team did a really surprisingly deep analysis. They didn't just look at the surface level sales figures. They dug into the company's operations, its history in the market, even customer preferences down to a minute level. And what they found were some pretty deep-rooted problems. Things like major inefficiencies in their supply chain, technology that was frankly outdated and holding them back significantly, and a very fragmented online presence. It just wasn't connecting.
Okay, so they had this clear diagnosis. What was the solution? What do they recommend that actually turned things around so dramatically?
Well, based on those insights, they proposed a pretty bold, multi-pronged strategy. A big focus was on digital transformation, not just slapping up an e-commerce site, but a full omni-channel approach, linking online and physical stores seamlessly. They also massively optimized the supply chain using data analytics for smarter inventory management, predicting demand better. And they even redesigned the physical stores to be more engaging, more like experiences, not just places to buy things.
And the result?
The outcome was Pretty remarkable. A significant turnaround. Not just better numbers, but improved operational efficiency across the board, a big jump in online sales, and customer satisfaction scores went way up. It really shows the power of a well thought out holistic strategy, and I think the value of really leaning into digital innovation, not just bolting it on.
A great example.
Yeah.
Now let's switch gears. Time for the cautionary tale. This one involves a financial services firm. They were trying to implement a new, crucial IT system. Seems straightforward on paper, but it was rushed. And that turned out to be a huge mistake.
Yeah, this is a tough one. In this situation, the consulting firm brought in really underestimated the sheer complexity involved. Specifically, integrating this new system with all the existing older legacy systems the firm relied on. But crucially, and this is often the fatal flaw, there was a major lack of effective change management. It wasn't just about the tech install, it was about the people using it. That oversight led directly to widespread resistance from employees, morale just plummeted, and there were serious visible disruptions to client service. It really does raise that question about the hidden costs when you cut corners on the human side of change.
So the implementation itself was flawed because of that rush.
Fundamentally flawed, yes. It was basically rolled out without enough upfront analysis, without proper testing in realistic scenarios, without adequate training for the staff who had to use it, and honestly, without even clear communication about why this painful change was necessary. This lack of preparation just caused chaos. Significant operational problems erupted across the firm. Employees were struggling, frustrated, and clients felt the impact almost immediately. Not good.
And the outcome sounds pretty bleak.
It was. The project completely failed to meet its objectives. It resulted in substantial financial losses for the firm, a huge hit to employee morale, which was already shaky, and widespread client dissatisfaction. It took them years to rebuild that trust. This case just powerfully underscores how vital thorough planning is, and consistent stakeholder engagement, getting everyone from the top floor to the front line involved and heard, and especially effective change management all the way through. You simply cannot ignore the human element in these big organizational shifts. Trying to bulldoze through it is often the most expensive mistake you can make.
Wow. Okay, so we've seen the highs and the lows. What does all this mean for you, listening right now, whether you're leading a team, starting a project, or even just tackling a personal challenge? What are the biggest, most practical lessons we can pull out from these real-world examples? The successes, and maybe even more importantly, the failures.
I think we can definitely pull out some clear, overarching lessons. These apply way beyond just formal consulting projects. First, thorough analysis and planning. You absolutely have to dig deep and understand the real challenge, not just the surface symptoms. Success really hinges on that deep understanding and a solid plan. Second, stakeholder engagement. It's just crucial. You need buy-in. You need alignment. It makes implementation so much smoother. Remember that phrase, people support what they help create? That's key.
Right, makes total sense.
Third, adaptability. Things rarely go exactly to plan. You have to be ready and willing to adjust your strategy, tweak solutions when new information pops up or unexpected roadblocks appear. Rigidity can kill a project. Fourth, effective change management. We saw how critical this is. Focusing on the people side of change, managing resistance, communicating clearly, that's essential for making sure any solution actually sticks and delivers lasting success. A great strategy nobody uses is worthless.
Couldn't agree more on that one.
And finally, fifth, comprehensive implementation support. Often, that continued support, guiding the client through the tricky bits of putting the plan into action, is what really makes the difference between a project that succeeds and one that just kind of fizzles out after the big presentation. It bridges the gap from idea to reality.
So this deep dive, hopefully, has pulled back the curtain a bit on this whole consulting world. We've seen it's a really deliberate, thoughtful journey. From that deep analysis all the way through to implementation, whether that ends in success or, like we saw, sometimes frustration, it gives you a kind of roadmap, really, for understanding how complex problems get tackled, how they get unpacked, and how, ideally, they get transformed.
Exactly. And we really believe that this kind of knowledge is most valuable when it's not just, understood intellectually, but actually applied. So we'd encourage you, as you listen, to think critically about how these principles, from really nailing the problem definition right at the start to that often forgotten knowledge transfer at the end, how they might apply to challenges you're facing. Could be professional, could be personal.
Absolutely. Food for thought. So maybe here's something to chew on after we finish up today. Considering all these steps, all these lessons, what element of this whole consulting process do you think gets overlooked most often in the real world? And why is that specific step so critical for actually achieving success in the end?